another version of my question because I was sick all of last week. So I was like,
Oh,
oh well, let's focus on the final question instead.
yes, yes. Well, we're near to that time. I have to write the exam as soon as this class is over.
Oh,
So,
so we must be on our best behavior so you could write a good one.
yes, that's the one. And then number two, on Saturday, I would have expected you would have already done your second read through of the manual,
Okay.
so that when I finish unit 10, we'll be able to do a review based upon the questions.
That
Just a
sounds good.
general, yeah, and then focus as to where the questions from the exam is coming. So I don't expect to have a lot of people asking me a lot of questions.
Good evening.
Good evening. You could ask me questions when we go through a chapter. But when I say the exam question is focusing on this, I shouldn't have any questions.
I hope not.
I can't give you much detail. So if you have started to read your chapters over, when I tell you a question is coming concerning this, you should know exactly what chapter that is.
You say that's what we're gonna do on Saturday, Ms. Arthur?
After we finish here, unit 10.
Oh,
Why? Why are you saying oh like that?
9 and 10 is short enough for us to combine tonight. I
Mm,
asked in for too much.
well, that depends. If everybody is on. We could do it that way.
Ms. Archer, the homework questions, when they do before next week Saturday?
We could bring it on Saturday.
Next week Saturday, right? Or
What next
Saturday?
Saturday? What do you mean? You mean the one that's the take-home question for the exam?
The one about there are times when the corporate veil could be lifted and the other one, or the two,
Those were two practice questions.
okay.
And then
So
I
now-
sent you all an actual question that is on the exam. And remember, I said you could bring it on the day of the exam, or you could send it to me as your final submission.
Right. So if we are behind, just saying someone is behind,
Mhm.
they can just do the last question, right? And that'll be fine.
What do you mean do the last, the actual exam question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you don't have to
Okay.
send me the drafts. You could just do the exam question that I sent you and bring it on the day of the exam.
Okay. And how many questions are we gonna have? Like 5?
I don't know. I gonna write it tonight.
We gotta be good so she could write us a good
Yeah.
exam.
Yeah, this is the month of love. Please. We need
That's
much.
that finish on the 14th.
Pardon?
I thought that finished on the 14th.
No, ma'am, it's the month, the entire month.
Ah,
It's
So
hard,
y'all-
man. We have to stay away from having heart attacks.
Really? It ain't that bad. All right, let's get started. Company secretarial practice. So we know that the secretary is appointed by the board. The secretary is an officer of the company. And we do know that to be a company secretary requires certain skill sets. So this role as being a company secretary is someone who acts like a go-between the chairman and the other members of the board, between the chairman and the chief executive officer or the managing director. And it also acts as a go-between between the chief executive officers and senior management. So this person who is a corporate secretary has a very key role in terms of corporate governance, because they are responsible for ensuring that the board receives all of the requisite documents at the appropriate time for approval. Where there are matters to be followed up, is the job of the company secretary to follow up on those matters and make sure that they are actioned. So the company secretary is responsible for the minutes, the resolutions, the share certificates, all of those things is what administratively the company secretary is responsible for. So the precise role of a company secretary isn't clearly defined. It varies from company to company. So you can't move from one company to another company, expect to be doing the same task. There are some tasks that are required because those are statutory requirements, but each one is tailored to the company itself. So if you were in a company secretary in a private company, that's totally different from being a company secretary in a public company. So they have extensive duties and responsibilities, and they even have authority to enter into contracts on behalf of the company. They play both a legal role and they also play a senior role. Again, it depends upon the organization. Now, another thing that a company secretary does is they are responsible for advice. They give advice and guidance to directors, and they give advice and guidance to the managing director, the chief operating officer, and even the senior management. Because remember now, the company secretary is more or less like the guardian for the articles of the organization. That is the go-to person who's able to tell either the directors or the CEO or senior management what the company can and cannot do. The company secretary is also responsible for making sure that the board is aware of its statutory requirements and that the company meets all of its statutory and regulatory requirements on a timely basis. The company secretary is also responsible for making sure that dividends are paid to shareholders. If it is a public company, that they get the requisite approvals from the regulatory bodies. They have to make sure that all the records are kept properly and that the records are accurate. They're also responsible for making sure that the directors are aware of when meetings are to be held. And the same thing, they are the ones who have to make sure that the shareholders know when meetings are being held, sending out the meeting notices, making sure proxies go out where appropriate. So to be a company secretary requires you to have a good understanding of the company's business. So you have to know the nature of the business, the cycle of the business. You have to know what are the legal and regulatory requirements for that business. And you have to know from a corporate governance perspective, internationally, what is required of that company and its board and senior management. So that means that you actually going to be responsible for making sure that the board is trained in the areas that it needs to know in order to meet corporate governance responsibilities. You also have to have a knowledge of company law, practice, and procedure. You have to be able to read financial statements and understand them. Because at the board meeting, you are responsible for taking the minutes. So if you don't understand what the CFO is saying, then what you write in the minutes will not make any sense. You have to have good oral and written communication skills, because like I said, you're the person who will draft the resolutions. You're the person who will draft contracts between the company and a vendor. You are the person who will actually be speaking to the chairman or to the directors or to the chief financial officer as to what should be done. So you must have good oral and written communication skills. You have to be detail oriented, which means that if you're dealing with a renewal of a contract that has to go before the board, you have to be able to sit down with the department head, with the CEO, explain what was done the last time, identify what the changes are, and say whether or not those changes require the prior approval of the board or whether or not the approval is required because of the amount of the contract. So that's where the detail comes in. You have to be a good mediator, and that's between different heads of department. You have to be a team builder, and you have to be a consensus building person, which means that you have to be able to marry any conflicts between the department heads, the chief executive officer, and the board. You have to think critically on your feet, and you have to make sure that if there is any bureaucratic thinking between the board or between the board members themselves, you have to be able to manage that. So that means that once you have a profile of a board member, you then have to figure out which board member is sitting next to whom, because you don't want friction between the board members. You have to be flexible and you have to be creative. If the board wants something done, the board is going to say, this is what we want the company to do. Then that falls from you as the secretary communicating that to the CEO, which means that you're going to have to find a way to say it, that they will action it so that it gets done. So overall, the person who is a company secretary have to have very strong leadership ability, because they're dealing with shareholders, they're dealing with the chairman of the board, they're dealing with the board of directors, then they're also dealing with the CFO or the managing director, and they're also dealing with senior management. Any questions so far?
No, ma'am.
It's a good role. It's a very good job. So the duties and responsibility of a company secretary is, like I said, to maintain the statutory documents. They'll also maintain the corporate seal if there is one, because the law now states that you do not have to have a seal. You ensure all of your statutory filings are done and that they're done on time. You provide advice to the directors where it's needed, which means that if there is an action that the board wants to take, you are responsible for checking the articles of association, any past resolutions, any minutes that would have discussed the matter beforehand, to make sure that not only are you in compliance with the laws, but also that you're in compliance with the company's rules. So you make sure you ensure that dividends are paid. If you are a company that is regulated, there are regulations or guidelines as to when dividends can be paid. So shareholders may ask the chairman for dividends. The chairman then turns to the company secretary, the CEO, and the CFO as to whether dividends can be paid, how much can be paid, when it can be paid, and will it be paid. And like I said earlier, they are responsible for assisting with the drafting of the agenda, the minutes, and the board resolution. They also act as a confidant to the executive and non-executive directors. Remember, they are an intermediary. They ensure that AGMs are held and that they're actually done within the specified time limits. So most of the time when a company has an AGM, it's actually done in the middle of the directors meeting. It may be for half an hour, maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes, but the agenda is already prepared and the resolutions are already prepared. They are responsible for organizing and administering the board meetings and the shareholder meetings. And now there's no longer paper documentation for board meetings. Everything is electronic. So they are responsible, along with their assistant, for ensuring that all the documents are uploaded in a timely manner. And of course, once a board meeting is finished, they have the responsibility to communicate any deliberations that are relevant to various stakeholders within the organization. For example, approvals. If a contract required the board approval, then once it is approved, the company secretary would send an email to that department head via the CEO or the CFO that contract has been approved by the board. Now, there are some legal consideration for a company secretary. and they owe a company a duty of skill and care and diligence in carrying out their role. And they can be liable for negligence for failing to exercise the necessary standard in being that role as company secretary. They are more or less called a de facto legal and compliance officer. They should procedurally ensure, along with the chairman, that the board and other company meetings are conducted in a proper manner. So you see that the company secretary is responsible not just for sending out the meeting notice and the proxies, but also ensuring that the boardroom is prepared, that all the documents are being uploaded, that the right people sit, if they're having a physical meeting, that the right people are sitting with each other. They make sure that food is prepared, coffee is made, all of that. Procedural propriety is important to ensure that the validity of the meeting and the resolution passed cannot be questioned. So the secretary is responsible for making sure that the format of the meeting is carried out in accordance with the Articles of Association. Now, as a secretary, you should know the different types of shares that your company has. And listed here are just 3 of the typical ones. You could have ordinary shares that have no special benefits or restrictions. You could have deferred shares, and that's where you receive a dividend only after all other dividends have been paid. Or you could be a preferred shareholder, often that it has no voting rights, and you receive a dividend before everybody else. So you always paid first. You have to know the terminology related to shares, share capital. That's the value of the assets of a company that's held as shares. And then share issue is the amount of shares that are being sold in a company to the public. Other documents that relate to shares is the share register that lists who are the shareholders, the share certificate that states the amount of shares that an investor holds, the share transfer form, that's where you transfer shares from one person to another, the resolutions that affect the share transfers, and the proxy for the meetings. The company financial statements provide an overview of the company's financial condition in the short and the long term. So it depends on the company. The company may just prepare annual financial statements. Some companies prepare monthly, some quarterly, some semi-annually. It depends on the complexity and the nature of the business and whether or not the entity is a regulated one or a private one. So when you talk about financial statements, there are some basic statements as a company secretary that you should be familiar with, and you should be able to read it and understand it. Because remember, like I said, you're going to have to take minutes, and the minutes has to make sense. So first is the balance sheet. The balance sheet has the assets and the liabilities and net equity at a given period of time. And I've given you some examples in the manual. Then you have the income statement, and the income statement gives you the profit and loss. It tells you how much you've made, how much you've spent, and what's your net income, and then what's your net income after taxes. So you could have it before taxes and you could have it after taxes. The next part that you have to know is the statement of retained earnings. And that shows the changes in the company's earnings over a period of time. The fourth one is cash flow. And that's looking at how the money is being spent, how it's being invested, and how it's being financed. So as a company secretary, you have to know the different types of minutes. Because remember now, you're responsible not only for organizing it, not only for directing the chairman during the meeting, not only for saying when persons from the company can be invited into the board meeting to make presentation, but you take notes, because at the end of the meeting, you're then responsible for typing up those minutes. So you have the director's minutes, you have shareholders' minutes, and you have general minutes. You have different meetings. You have annual general meetings. You have extraordinary general meetings and you have ordinary meetings. Ordinary meetings are meetings of the directors or the shareholders to decide or approve or authorize a particular matter of transaction involving the company. The extraordinary one, a special meeting of shareholders to discuss something important that cannot wait until the annual general meeting. And then the annual general meeting is the meeting of the shareholders. And that takes place once a year. And that's when they elect the officers, the accounts approved, dividends are determined, and they normally would say whether or not they ratify all the action that is being carried out by the chief executive officer. Any questions? Comments?
I had one, Miss Archer.
Yes.
Okay, so actually, okay. So account officers, okay, but in this sense, when they're doing, let's say, all of the going through like the financials and stuff. And I know they call it investment reviews. Are they then acting as a secretary?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
'Cause I
No.
think that's okay, because they have to go through all these too to make
Yeah.
sure the investment review. And then, like you say, you was talking about the minutes, and I know they have to make minutes too, right?
Yes, but that's in a different capacity.
Okay.
That's a different capacity. So let's take your company where you work. Right?
Yes.
The company itself. Your company as itself has a secretary. You're
I
aware of that,
think
right?
yeah, I think okay, the company itself is the secretary, then you're registered agent and office. And then like on certain accounts we act as the director and the secretary of the, like, depending on what the company is.
Right. So in that role, when your company acts as a officer
Mm-hmm.
in the role of secretary,
Mm-hmm.
it has to carry out these functions.
Okay.
That is in terms of those companies. Now, let's just say you have a trust structure, and within that trust structure, that trust owns companies around the world. Let's say one of the companies is a retail chain store. The other one may be a water producing company.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of those companies must have a company secretary.
Okay.
And that person is responsible for ensuring that meetings are held, taking the minutes, liaising between the chairman and the board, liaising between the chairman and the shareholders, communicating to the CEO or the CFO.
So another question, would this relate to, like, let's say when it comes to the memo and articles? Well, articles of association, like the memo and arts, like, it'll tell you, okay, we're the registered agent, da 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 da. Then when it comes to the minutes, and it'll say, okay, when, like, you talk about the annual general meeting and the company, well, the board, okay, I trying to figure out. I know we the registered agent and officer.
Mhm.
So when it comes to these companies now having their meetings,
Mhm.
I just trying to figure out how to break it all up, like with all the meetings for all those companies.
What do you mean how they break it up?
Okay, because like when we look at our, like, okay, if we act as a secretary, it's like one person who is the secretary out of the company who represents the company for all of our company. So
Mhm.
So every year, this one individual has to be involved in all of these AGMs?
Yeah, but you see, the thing about it is, in your company, like other companies that provide corporate service, it is a little bit different because
Okay,
there's a lot of changes.
okay,
Now, if they're on a company, like what I was saying, like within a trust, you have a secretary, and that company is a company that's a big retail chain. The person is not like a corporate secretary in your company who's just moving paper. They're interactive. They're having physical meetings. They're sitting around the table having real discussions about business.
okay. And traveling, going to see these people.
Yeah, it depends on what needs to be done. So that's
Okay,
why, remember I said at the beginning, you could be a company secretary for a private company, or you could be for a public company, or you could be a company secretary in a corporate service scenario.
okay,
So that's why we have corporate service providers,
okay,
because they play that role of being a secretary. So what they'll do is they'll incorporate the company with you. They'll tell you who is the members, who are the directors, who are the officers. And let's just say a member, a company within your organization is the secretary. Because sometimes they use a nominee company of the financial corporate service provider as an officer. Now, within your corporate service department, there is a person who fulfills that role. And their job then is to act as the company secretary on behalf of their employer, who then acts on behalf of the client, because he's being paid a fee for that service.
okay, okay. S- So, in the capacity of an account officer,
Mhm.
are they only performing the service per se for that trust that is administered to them, like going through the financials to like say all of these things, like all these reviews and the four basics, going through the balance sheet and all these things that you spoke about, the statement of return earnings, profit and loss, so that they could get a investment and do minutes that will be on the terms of just acting under the trust then.
No, I lost now. You said an account
Officer.
and a company secretary is two different roles.
So why would the account officer be doing this?
Because account officers, as it says, account is looking at the
Okay,
sheet
okay,
from an income perspective and expenses.
okay.
A
So
company
that is,
secretary isn't looking at it from that perspective.
they just making sure everything is in check.
Yes.
Okay, okay. Gotcha.
So if let's say the CFO presents to the company secretary and says, these are my financial statements as at the 31st of December. The company secretary knows that for those financial statements to come to them, those financial statements have to be signed by two directors to be complete.
Okay,
They know if whether or not a management report should be accompanied with that. They can open the document and look at the balance sheet and see whether or not the company made a profit for the year or the company made a loss. So let's say they're sitting around the table and what the chairman says, I spoke with the shareholders last week and the shareholders are wondering when we're going to pay a dividend. He turned to the CFO. What are your views on that? How do we deal with that? So the CFO will then start saying, well, for this year, we earned X dollars. We spent this amount. Due to COVID, we had some unexpected expenses. We had to do this, we had to do that. So right now we're running a loss for last year, but we do have retained earnings, which means that's money built up over the years, which we can use subject to regulatory approval. The company secretary then, in that role, remember, she is that legal compliance officer. She turns to the chairman and she says, because in the meeting, the company secretary speaks to the chairman. She says to the chairman, regulatory approval can be requested, but be mindful of. So that means that a company secretary has to know what are the rules or the guidelines to request approval. Let's just say it's a private company. The company secretary should say, chairman, be mindful that 2 years ago, we would have paid dividends. And the shareholders stated that going forward, this is what they expect. That company secretary stands in that role to advise either side. So it's not a willy-nilly job.
Okay.
It's a very serious job.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As I was I was mixing it up.
Yeah, don't mix it up.
No, I got you now.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Oh my God, I love it. Leah,
Yes, Mom, I don't have any questions. But we could go on to the next chapter though.
we are going there in 1 second. Quote, a secretary is a mere servant. Her position is that she is to do what she is told. And no person can assume that she has any authority to represent anything at all. Those words were uttered by Lord Esher in Barnett, Hawes and Co. versus South London Tramways Company in 1887. The question is, to what extent does the statement reflect the current status of a company secretary? That's a past exam question.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hi, Miss Archer. Did you miss us as much as we missed you?
Very funny, yes.
Okay. Can you repeat that question, please?
I thought Leah was going to be the scribe, but she going quiet on me. Quote. I'll use the exact
Slowly, Miss Archer.
I'll use the exact words that the judge said. A quote, a secretary is a mere servant. A secretary is a mere servant. His position is that he is to do. His position is that he is to do what he is told. A secretary is a mere servant. His position is that he is to do what he is told. And no person can assume that he has any authority, and no person can assume that he has any authority to represent anything at all. End quote. And no person can assume that he has any authority to represent anything at all. End quote. Per Lord Esher in Barnett, per Lord Escher in Barnett, Horace, Hoares, and Co. Barnett, Horace, and Co. versus South London Tramways Company, 1887. Full stop. To what extent does the statement reflect? To what extent does the statement reflect the current status of a company secretary?
Ms. Archer, that was before they define what a company secretary actually is.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I did say 1887.
Okay, yeah. False, all false.
Hmm?
I think the quote from the judge at the time, or whoever it was, the Lord, whoever they were, is not accurate for today. In simple ways, a secretary is an officer. An officer of a company has authority. The secretary actually should be policing, I guess, everybody that they mediate between, because they need to keep them in line to make sure that they're not doing anything to the detriment of the company. And sometimes that requires telling someone that they're doing the wrong thing.
You have to write more than that for me.
Yeah, I know. I'll give you like 2 pages.
In the exam? Wow. One when you go write the rest. So when we do the review on Saturday, and I say there is a question on the company secretary, one that you just heard, you should, after you've reread the chapter, formulate it in your mind as to how you would approach the question. You may ask a general question. You may have read something, you may have thought about it, and then you may say, I have a question to ask, because I'm not giving you the answer. But just like how Lavette wanted a clarification, she may read this question again, decide that this is how I want to approach it, look at what she sees being done at her office, and say, on Saturday, I'm still not clear. Because she knows how she's going to approach the question. Is that understood?
Yes.
Why your yes sound so weak?
Right far from the computer screen.
Understood, Miss Archer. I have another question though.
Go ahead.
So on Saturday, just for clarification, because I know I was a few minutes late, so I may have missed some stuff said already. But in reference to the exam on Saturday, when we do the revision, you're still gonna give us our areas of concentration
Yes.
and the breakdown of the exam, right?
Yes.
Hold on, Mariah. Okay, just confirming. Thank you.
But I'm not giving you the answers.
Okay, and then also, okay, one second.
So that means that when I go through the chapters, I would have expected that you would have already begun your second or third review. So if I say to you, there's a question coming on company secretary, which you have already, the only thing you should be coming to me was that after you would have looked at this question again between now and Saturday, you may decide you want to jot down for your cheat sheet so you can memorize it, how you want to approach the question. And then you may say, I need some clarification. If a secretary does this and this and this and that, why is it expected they do this, or can they do that? Or what's the source of their authority to do this? Then that means that you've read the chapter, you've looked at the question, and you just need clarification to understand. So when you approach it in the exam. Now, when we review certain chapters, I may ask you what this chapter is about. Do you have any questions? If I haven't written a question on that chapter, I move on to the next chapter. Whenever there's a chapter that I've written a question on, I stop and I say, there is a question on the exam related to appointment of trustees. Make sure you know how a trustee is appointed in certain circumstances. So I don't expect you to be looking at me blank. You should have already known which unit that is in and know how a trustee is appointed. You may not know in your head at the moment on Saturday, but you could turn to that page in your book and you could write final exam question. Because otherwise you're going to come in the exam and you're going to be searching and searching and searching in your brain. And every time you search and you can't locate what it is, you're losing 10 points.
So, Ms. Archer, are
Yes.
you saying that we're getting these questions tonight so that we can come with
No.
our
No.
questions on
No.
Saturday that we may need clarity on?
No. I just gave you one.
Yeah, but how many questions are we having in total?
I don't know. I haven't written it yet.
So that means we're gonna be emailing you this week
Why?
because, okay, so I'm trying to say Saturday, we'll be getting the bulk of the questions, right? So we wouldn't know until we go over those chapters to really say, oh, I don't understand this exactly. So now we'll have to reach out to you, I guess, after Saturday, if we need clarification on something. Whereas if we get the questions before Saturday, we can do this in class on Saturday.
Well, I haven't written it yet.
Okay.
Why
So
you
you're gonna leave your phone number? Because I think it's easier for me to call you than email you all of my concerns.
It's concerns.
Yeah, like if I need clarity on stuff.
Concerns.
Yes.
Wow. We'll talk about that on Saturday.
Okay, ma'am.
So how is the question going? The take-home question.
Could you repeat that for me, please? The secretary is a mass servant and no person can assume.
Secretary is a mass servant. His position is that he is to do what he is told, and no person can assume that he has any authority to represent anything at all, end quote.
I write in.
Oh, you're writing? Oh, I thought you just wanted me to read it to make sure.
No, I write in. The secretary is a mass servant. His position.
A secretary is a mass servant. His position is that he is to do. His position is that he is to do what he is told. And no person can assume, that he has any authority, to represent anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, per Lord Esher, Esher, in Barnett,
Mm-hmm.
Horares, Hoares, and Co. versus South London Tramways, Tramways, Co. 1887.
Mhm.
And that was a question on company secretary.
Okay.
So as I was telling the class when we first started, I expect that you knew that tonight is the 2 last classes. You know that Saturday is the review. I mean, you know that tonight was supposed to be 9, Saturday is supposed to be 10. The class at the beginning asked for us to do 9 and 10, and then Saturday will just be on the review. And I said, I expect that on Saturday when I see you, you should have already begun your review. If you come on Saturday and you haven't started your review, then you're going to sit there and you're going to be getting to get a headache because you're going to begin
Which
to
Saturday you talking about? I was here for that, but I mean, and you referencing this Saturday come in? Okay.
Their headache already there started, to be honest. So,
So you ready have a headache?
yes,
Why?
there's a lot right now, and I just walking in the house, like just walking in the house, and it's been rough. So I might as
Get a
well
cup
start
of water. Get a cup of water. Get a cup of water.
as well. Yeah, okay.
Now, before I do this last chapter, is there any particular chapter you want me to go over in detail? Is there any chapter that you all as a class need clarification on?
I think we need clarification. Well, for me, I need clarification mostly on 1 through 10, to be honest.
On
But
which one?
like 1 through 10. But no. I will try to study tonight and tomorrow. So on Saturday I can really say what I need you to go over,
Okay.
please.
No, I'm going to go through 1 through 10, but I know sometimes students have a particular chapter, even though they would have already, had the lecture on it, they don't
Mhm.
understand it. That's what I'm asking. Is there a
And this
particular
class can be
chapter
pushed
that
back,
someone has issues with?
and this exam can be pushed back 1 week. Hey, you can do that for assignments after initial full
Push it
time.
back.
I mean, if everyone else is for it, but it's rough. Like 1
Mhm.
week.
But you push it 1 week, how would that affect when the next section starts?
We can worry about that when that happens.
You funny, you know.
No, for true. Like, y'all don't agree? Someone help me with DeAndre, where you at?
Oh, where's my calendar? Hold on.
And how come we don't get a week in between the 2 sessions?
Oh, Lord. Let's see. Hold on. Where's my calendar? Let's see now. We're going into, I just had this calendar in my hand right here. So, exam is Saturday, February the 25th. And the next class begins the following week. So it's the 18th. So you saying a week is sufficient time?
It will be better than the 25th for me. I mean, but if everybody else want to do it on the 25th, I'll just go with the flow. But I think I know I need more time, to be honest. Anybody else?
They're all quiet. They ready.
I think silence gives consent and they're agreeing. I
While
hope.
we're talking about scheduling, are we also gonna miss the Saturday class that falls in on the Easter weekend holiday? Because that's the Saturday before the second exam as the schedule runs right now.
I've already pointed that out to Miss Dean. I pointed that out. That the 8th is a holiday. It's the
Okay.
Thursday. The 6th is fine, but the 8th, yeah, we're gonna have to move that 8th.
So basically, everything getting pushed back a week then.
If you all
Well,
are in
we have to see
agreement.
what Miss Dean says, because don't forget now
So-
these teachers already.
Yeah, it was
They-
set.
they-
Or Ms. Archer, would you consider this maybe?
what's that?
Okay, now listen. So you give us the questions on whatever day, right? And we have, let's say, a day to get the answers to you. I think like to be home, to be in your book, and you just giving us a shorter time to submit the exam questions would be better. No? I think we should consider it.
What do you mean shorter time?
Like instead of us coming to this to sit the exam, like you give us the questions, and then let's say if you give it to us on Thursday, hey, you have Saturday until Saturday at 12 to submit your answers for this. Like you'd be doing all of us a favor, and we'd really appreciate it and love you even more.
So you're asking for a take home?
So that's correct.
Mm.
Take homes just be marked harder, you know.
And you gotta give more information.
But you still gotta
Much-
get the information of a question at 20
And you're
points.
still working in between all of this.
So okay, you rather be home with your book and doing this, or not having your book and trying to study in 2 days. I mean,
No,
for me.
that's if she pushed the exam back, then we'll have like 2 weeks.
So okay, if you push it back, that means all of these dates have to change. That's number one.
Right.
If you do a take home, you'd get the exam on the 23rd and you would return it on the 25th. That's what you're suggesting,
No, ma'am.
Alicia?
No,
No?
I think in the 3rd and the 5th still. But like no, if it's a take home, I could do the 23rd and 25th. I have no problem with that one. It was a take home. So we still would be on track.
Yeah.
I don't mind that one.
Okay, I'll see what Miss Dean says. But the class says, that's 2 options she gave. Push the whole thing back.
So we pushing the test date back 1 week, is what you're saying?
Yeah,
Just the following Saturday?
Yeah, if you push the test date back 1 week to March, then when you go to section 2, all those dates have to push back 1 week.
Mhm.
And that may be a problem.
So
we pushed back
push
one
back.
because of April because of Easter, right?
So
Yeah.
we'll be sitting the exam not on the 15th.
But
So
the
that
20,
and we'll be the 22nd. And that'll be after Easter because we missing Easter class anyway because it is a holiday.
yeah.
So I don't know. Cause for me, like, okay, Ms. Archer, question. Like Alicia, her suggestion. So if we have a take home, right?
Mm-hmm.
It have to be all typed out too, then.
No, why?
I just was wondering.
You can write it by hand and scan it.
Okay.
Type in this Elisa worries if you have a take home. That's
I
for
just
me,
used to how you be doing when you get a take home test, that's like essays.
we already know that the question worth 20 points. Now whatever you want to get to 20 points, that's what we have to do. But you take home, she gave us 2 days or whatever to answer all questions. It's really up to us. We would have our books, we have everything, all our resources right there. answer the question, have it to her by a certain time or whatever day she tells us. That's it. I could do that.
I ain't hearing nothing.
Man, I need to get Deandra. Hold,
What happened to her? She was on just now.
let me call her right now. Hold on.
Okay, and I got a reminder about this, April the 8th. So I'm gonna change April the 8th to the 15th day. So why don't we do April the 6th, and you want the last in the last class. You want that on the 13th or you want it on the 15th?
For the last class on the
Mhm.
13th, please, because I spoke to Miss
No,
Jane.
no. I'm talking about in the second part.
You're right. For the last class for me, if we could do it on the 13th, that would work in my favor. If not, I'll just look at the recording because I told Miss Jane today I can't take the exam on the 15th.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay, so we change that to the 13th then.
If everyone else is, please.
Hi, I'm so sorry, guys. I got disconnected. What did I miss?
Yeah, I did
No.
it too. So
Alicia
Deandra,
is trying to convince us all to change our schedule to do an at-home test instead of a test on Saturday, the 25th.
so what in that
That's one option, Leo. You forget the second option. You gotta sell it right.
I mean, y'all must be wanting class to go on forever,
So-
so now we could go straight to the end of April.
No, but okay.
No, the
Extra
question.
Hear me out, Deandra. Okay, so I'm saying the exam is on the 25th next week, right? I know that I'm not ready. I can't even do the exam for chapter 1 next week, right? To be honest, right? So I suggested that we get take-home questions. If we get the take-home question, let's say on a Thursday or whatever day, Ms. Archer is going to give us like 2 days or a day and a half, however it is, whatever it is, in order to have to answer the questions and submit to her by that time. We have our books, we're doing it home, we're doing it to work, we're doing it wherever we are. We're not going into BIFs to sit this exam, but we have the open books. We could just still do our cheat sheet or whatever it is and take the exam, on the 25th. The other option was not to do it on the 25th and then do it the following week, which is March, I think 4th.
So Ms. Archer, what would be pros and cons of both options?
If we push it back a week, that means all the dates in the second part changes, and Miss Dean will have to contact the lecturers to see if they're available.
I mean, in terms of your grading system. Like,
Oh, you mean take home versus
right, in class.
the questions are worded differently.
It's worded differently, but the same
But
points and everything.
everything would be like the same point scale, and
Mm-hmm.
you'll be grading us the same or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mom.
Just
Oh,
don't forget now, when you write an exam question to be taken in a room, is written in a way whereby the examiner knows there's only so much information you could carry. Versus if you're home, it's expected you have all of your books available.
mm-hmm. Okay, well,
It's a
I'm
different approach
down
to
with
So,
answering the
so
question.
a take-home question, since Ms. Archer doesn't want to outright say it, a take-home question will be harder and you will be expected to do more work than if you sit in the classroom doing it without your resources to rely on.
Of course,
But it's the same amount of points for the
yes.
question. Okay.
And they won't be, these are not, besides the one I gave you as the first one as the take home that's worth 20 points, these other questions will not be long.
you mean for the take-home exam, they won't be long? Or
Whether it's
in
take
class?
home or in class, they're not long.
Okay, well, I'll be down for the take-home, but I mean, I guess we can take a vote and so that it's fair. I don't know.
I prefer to take my exam on the 25th at fifth, not a take-home.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well,
Yeah.
technically, I don't have a problem with both options, but for me, I just feel like I wouldn't mind the classroom, but I don't want to do it next week. I prefer the extra week to study because I know if I take this exam hypothetically in the classroom setting right now, like Alicia said, I won't perform well. Like I feel like a week like is really short, but I know like everybody's schedule. So
Yeah, for me, I really don't want the dates to change because my birthday is the week after our final straw of this stage 2 trust. So I really don't want the dates to change for me. I prefer it staying on schedule.
So you go on to stage 2. So if we move in the 8th to the 13th, we still have to
got
change
to-
the date of final
Still
exam.
a fact,
because the
you know.
Easter, the date still could change regardless because
Yes,
Easter
because
we won't
that's
help that
what was
class.
wrong.
So this is what she's saying. We still gonna be affected with the date change.
yeah, but I already incorporated that date change. If it pushed back another week, then that's gonna run into my birthday weekend, and I'm not gonna
Oh.
be here.
So your birthday on the
Because
22nd, the
Archer-
week of the 22nd.
My birthday is on the 29th. Wouldn't that fall
Oh,
on
the
that?
class would be finished by then. Because the exam would be on the 22nd.
With the Easter holiday?
Yeah, with the date change.
Yeah, we
It'll
still-
be the following week.
Which would be-
So the final exam will be the 22nd of April instead of the 15th.
Okay.
So next week it is?
And then Alicia was saying if hypothetically it was to change the date, was to push back, our last class would be the 13th of April instead of the 15th. So we'll have the 15th as review. And then that whole week to
I think that's
study.
review. And then, yeah, the whole week to study.
And then the final part of the stage 2 on the 22nd.
And then April 22nd is Exuma Regatta weekend.
You ain't focused. You ain't focused.
No, you ain't focused.
Ms. Archer, for clarification, you're saying April the 13th will be the last class, April the 15th will be review, and the exam will be April 22nd?
Yes.
And for the first session, the exam will be on the 25th still.
If that's what you all agree.
If it's in agreement. Because like the option, we have 2 options. So the
Right.
option is you either have to take home tasks, which Ms. Archer would administer, which in like they're saying we'll get it like on a Thursday or so, and we have to complete it by a certain date and time and submit it to her. That's one option, and that will still be for next week. And the second option is it's 3 options. The second option is we can all agree, or whoever agrees, that they would want to take the exam on the 25th at BIFS. The third option is we extend our exam an extra week because the dates of the class still have to change regardless in the second stage, not this first one. But if we choose to
Levette,
extend,
sorry, Levette, the dates are not changing in the second stage. The
yeah,
only
it's
date
changing
is
because
the 8th.
Easter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
that's
it's
what I
only
mean.
one
But what I'm
date.
saying
That's
is
at the end.
it will
So we
extend
will,
if we change our exam. That's what she's saying. Because if we don't take it next week, we get that extra week to study.
It
So
still will,
we'll have it
it
on
it will
March.
change.
will change regardless.
It will move back, which means our second exam will be on the weekend of the 29th instead
Yeah,
of the
no, the week of
22nd.
the 22nd, eh? Because
No,
the last
no,
class will be the
no.
13th.
No, the last class is going to be the 13th with the current schedule. If we push it back a week, we're not going to start the second section until the
Oh.
9th instead of the second.
The la-
I thought we was only okay.
and on the
So I thought the
18th.
only class we was missing was Easter
Yeah.
Saturday, which would be April 8th.
April, right?
Because our final exam was scheduled for April 15th. That's how it is on the schedule now. So
Week.
we missing the 8th. That's one class, right?
Change it to
So
the 13th.
the change or the last class changed to the 13th.
Right. And then the
So
exam will be on the
if we
22nd.
were gonna
Exam
take the
on the
exam,
22nd.
so yeah, it's still the
That's
same.
Yeah.
It's
still
the
the same
same
thing.
unless you talk about not doing the exam next week and doing it the week after. Then all of the weeks get
All the
pushed.
dates will change.
Right.
So
That's
instead of having our first session on the 2nd of March, we then have it on the 9th of March. Then the next week is
Oh, okay.
exactly, yeah.
That's what you mean.
right. Get that. But that's why it's up for a vote. Do we want to start on the 9th or do we still want to start on the 4th? That's where we are. It's either we wanted to end on the 22nd or we wanted to end on the 29th.
Respectfully, I'd like us to make a decision because we now at 7:40, which means we gonna have to do chapter 10 on Saturday instead of doing full review on Saturday because we could have finished chapter 10 tonight.
But that's what we
We
are.
can finish chapter 10 tonight. It's our class is scheduled around until 9. And it's
For
only a couple
me,
pages.
For me, I don't have an issue with taking the exam on the 25th
Okay. Where
In person.
in
Okay.
person.
Okay. Miss Archer, I won't be able to take my exam in person on the 25th.
Okay,
That's for me. So
Okay.
I don't
Noted.
mind if you have the questions, I don't mind doing it, the take-home questions. And I could do that. I don't have a problem with that. I still working weekends until I don't know when.
I mean, everybody else just need to say what it is they want
Right.
to do so it can be counted. I mean, so far, I guess that's like 4 of us who said what we want to do.
Mhm.
Okay. Everybody else will come in to take theirs, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Understood.
So those
Now,
who can come in will come in and those who can't then or
but you're the only person who can't.
okay.
That's what I'll advise, Miss Dean.
Okay.
Okay,
And I
now
told
there's no
her today
need.
too.
Hmm?
I told her that today as well, so that's fine.
Okay,
Alrighty.
so there's no need to panic about Unit 10. Because I could hear the panic in Leah's voice. Do you want to do Unit 10 now?
Oh,
Or do
it's
you
no
want to?
panic. I was just looking out for everybody and saying on Saturday we could have a full period of review instead of having to do a new set of topics. We could just go through
No,
every-
they could actually read this topic if they haven't read it. You do have tonight and tomorrow to get prepared. So if you haven't started to read, beginning from chapter 1, you have a lot of reading to do.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we could do chapter 10 tonight because this is very, very short chapter.
Yeah, it is very short.
So that way we could just review on Saturday.
Okay, so chapter 10 speaks about liquidation. And liquidation, of course, it depends on whether the company is solvent or insolvent. which means whether or not the company actually can pay its debts or it cannot. So once a company is dissolved, it ceases to exist. Liquidation is winding up or dissolution. And although dissolution is what we call the last stage of liquidation. So there are two types of liquidation, voluntary and involuntary. So the members or the creditors can wind up a company. So in the Bahamas, we have the Companies Winding Up Act and the regulations. And those two pieces of legislation apply to both CAC and IBC. If the company is solvent, which means that it's not in a deficit, you appoint a liquidator. If the company is insolvent, the creditors then apply to the court to have the company involuntarily wound up. And they may have some input in the appointment of a liquidator. So the objective of the liquidator is to ensure that the assets are secured, that the assets are received, they are realized, and they're distributed to the company's creditor. That's the first step. If there's any surplus, then they distribute that to the members and the stakeholders. So if you have a chance to look at the Companies Winding Up Act and its regulation, the law sets out who is to be paid first. So of course, you have to pay the government its taxes. You have to pay your employees. So it sets out the steps that you have to take to pay when you're winding up a company. So voluntary liquidation is where the members of the company, they resolve to wind up the company. And an involuntary is where you go to the court to ask for the company to be wound up. So where the winding up is commenced by a court order, the liquidator exercises his power under the direction of the court. And they are required to obtain consent or authorization of the court before entering into any transaction. So you could have in a voluntary liquidation, members or creditors. The members is where the directors and the shareholders decide to put the company into liquidation. The company for voluntary liquidation must be solvent. For creditors, liquidation voluntary, the directors or the shareholders decide to put it into liquidation and the company is insolvent, because that's the only reason why creditors would apply for a company to be liquidated, is because the company is insolvent, meaning that the company cannot pay its bills. So under the IBC Act, a company can be wound up voluntarily if the period, if any, fixed for the duration of the company by the Articles of Association expires. Or if the article states that when a particular event occurs, the company can be wound up. Or they could pass a resolution requiring the company to be wound up voluntarily. And it has to be passed by a majority of not less than 3/4 of the members. The members of the company can also pass a resolution that it is wound up voluntarily because it is insolvent. So the voluntary liquidation of a company is deemed to commence at the time of the passing of the resolution, authorizing the winding up, or on the expiry of the period or the occurrence of the event that's mentioned in the Articles of Association. So notwithstanding that a supervision order is subsequently made by the court. So the process for liquidating an IBC is, the first step is the resolution. as required by the memo and arts, that the affairs of the company should be wound up. A liquidator is appointed, and remember, liquidator is appointed if the company is solvent or insolvent. Approval of the plan of dissolution, execution of the articles of dissolution. You submit the articles of dissolution to the registrar for registration. The liquidator takes responsibility for winding up the company's affairs. Like I said earlier, he pays all the debts, he gathers the assets, he manages the bank accounts. And of course, the Winding Up Act gives provision for in the liquidation for interest on debts. So it says a winding up interest is payable in accordance with Section 90 on any debt proved in the winding up, including so much of any such debt as represents on the remainder of the debt. Any surplus remaining after the payment of the debt proved in the winding up shall, before being applied for any other purpose, be applied in paying interest on those debts in respect of the period during which they are being outstanding since the company went into liquidation. And all interest under this section ranks equally whether or not the debts on which it is payable rank equally. And of course, no interest shall be payable if the liquidation is concluded in less than 6 months or the accrued amount is less than $500. The liquidator advertises for creditors during the liquidation process. So you see those little advertisement in the newspaper where they would say that a company is in voluntary liquidation and it asks for any creditors to come forward. The notice of dissolution must be published within 30 days of the registration of the articles of dissolution. The liquidator prepares a statement of account in respect of his actions and transactions in the liquidation process and forwards a copy to each member. The liquidator then submits a statement or notice to the Registrar General that the winding up or dissolution has been completed. And then the Registrar General strikes the company off the register of companies upon receipt of the notice and issues a certificate of dissolution, certifying that the company has been dissolved. The date of the certificate is the date of the dissolution of the company. The liquidator publishes a notice that the company has been dissolved and has been struck off the register in the official gazette. And that's done once the issuance of the certificate of dissolution. Now, a company, a creditor, a member, or liquidator may, within 5 years, following the date of the striking off of the company, apply to the registrar to have the name restored to the register, paying the prescribed fee. Section 166, subsection 3 says if a company has been dissolved for the period of 5 years has expired, the company or creditor, member, or liquidator may apply to the court to have the name of the company restored to the register. An IBC may be struck off the company's register if it no longer satisfies the requirements of Section 14, subsection 1, 38, subsection 1, and Section 44 of the Act. Section 165, subsection 4 says a company struck off the register remains liable for all debt claims, their debts, their liabilities, and the obligations of the company. And the striking off does not affect the liability of any of its members, directors, officers, or agents. So once a company is struck off the register, it still incurs liabilities. A creditor could still bring a claim against the company, and the court may appoint an official liquidator. If a company is struck off under Section 165 and remains struck off continuously for a period of 5 years, the company is deemed dissolved. But the registrar, if it is in the best interest of the Crown, can apply to the court to have the company liquidated and appoint an official liquidator. Now, when there is an involuntary liquidation, The winding up or on dissolution of a company incorporated under the IBC Act may be wound up under the same circumstances as a company incorporated under the CAC. The circumstances in which a company may be wound up by the court are if the company has passed a resolution to be wound up, or the company doesn't commence its business within a year from its incorporation, or it suspends its operation for a whole year. The company is insolvent. The members are reduced in number to less than 2. The court is of the opinion that it is just and equitable that the company be wound up, or the regulator petitions for the winding up of a company which it has regulatory authority and whose license or registration has been suspended or revoked. And one of those were in the newspaper this week. Section 190 of the Companies Winding Up Act states that an application to the court for the winding up of a company can be made by petition presented by either the company after passing the resolution requiring the company to be wound up by the court, any creditor, any contributory or contributories, or a regulator. Or it could be wound up where the articles especially provide for the directors to wind up the company without the sanction of a resolution passed at a general meeting. An application for winding up should be determined by the court within 6 months of it being made, unless the court is satisfied that special circumstances justify an extension not exceeding 6 months. Upon hearing the winding up petition, the court may either dismiss the petition, they could adjourn the hearing conditionally or unconditionally, they could make a provisional order, or they could make any order that the court thinks fit. But the court shall not refuse to make a winding up order on the ground only that the company's assets have been mortgaged or charged to an amount equal to or in excess of those assets, or that the company has no assets. The role and responsibilities of the official liquidator and the procedure for winding up under the supervision of the court are set out in the Company's Winding Up Act. So on Saturday, you'll get an example of what a liquidation question will look like. Of course, you know, it has to do with process. Absolute silence. Does that mean excitement?
I have a question. I'm
Oh.
just trying to find it.
Okay.
Okay, about the dissolution and striking off. It said on section 165 says that if it remains struck off continuously for a period of 5 years, but just making sure that I understand, we can't restore a company unless 5 years has already passed, right? So what would cause it to not continuously be struck off for 5 years?
What do you mean what would cause it?
I mean, because it says I'm reading out of the book. If a company is struck off under section 165 and remains struck off continuously for 5 years.
I mean, there's no activity, nothing done. A lot of companies are like that.
Okay,
They
so
don't
a
pay their
company-
fees. Yeah,
but
they
they're
don't pay their
still
fees, they're
active.
struck off.
but they're still actually in operation, even though they're not.
They may be,
Legally
because
in-
don't forget,
okay.
they don't operate here locally.
Okay, understood.
So sometimes they come 10 years later. And then they pay the fees for all the years that they miss.
Ms. Archer, how late after paying your fees are you struck off? Several
Mm,
years or?
Oh, I had that in my head. Because I made a note of it, you know. I'll tell you on Saturday.
Okay,
'Cause I made a note, yeah. I made a note of it. And I can't remember, so I don't want to give you the wrong time.
Is this why the SASHA filing and all that important now?
This is why what you saying?
Like SERJA filings are important now for IVCs.
No, that's for different requirement.
Okay.
No.
Ms. Archer, the is involuntary liquidation. I remember somewhere in one of the earlier chapters, it was talking about when the company is winding up and they're appointed like a administrator, I guess. Does that mean that the company is still operational? It's just that they're not going to get any profits until the company is already paid off the debt?
Yeah, so the administrator is a operating company, and the administrator continues to run the company.
Appointed by the courts, right?
Yeah,
Okay. So the company is still open. It's just that what about like the creditors and the shareholders and everyone? What about they still work there or they still have the option of leaving the company if it's insolvent? Do they have
no.
to stay
Again,
while?
if it is insolvent, the administrator really is just putting the books in order for when the liquidator now comes to liquidate. That's what the administrator does. He's putting the books in order, gathering all the assets. If let's say if there are transactions that need to be completed, the administrator is going to do all of that in preparation for when the liquidator comes to liquidate.
So what about, let's just say I'm a company and I sell, let's just say I'm CBS. And the only way I make my money is if I have a sale, right? So let's just say CBS is now insolvent and they have a debt to pay. And they were, the court ordered administrator and a liquidator. What do they do? The company stays open is what I'm trying to gather. Like CBS stays open to the public so that they would be able to sell the products in order to pay down the debt, right?
Yes.
It's part of. So what happens to the shareholders and the creditors? Are they still like how they are able to move and the company stays ongoing, right? So do they have to stay tied to the company or it
Who, the
can
shareholders?
Yeah.
The shareholders have to stay to the end because the creditors have to be paid first.
Okay.
And if anything left, then they would receive some form of dividends. But all the creditors have to be paid first. All taxes have to be paid. All employees have to be paid.
Okay. So I guess that's why it would be involuntary. So it doesn't matter if they're against it.
Involuntary means it's by the order of the court.
By the court, right? Okay.
They don't have any say. They follow the law. So if it is voluntary, it means that the company is solvent. So the company would then go have the liquidator pay all the bills, all the creditors, and then they would see who else needs to be paid. And go ahead.
I was just gonna say I still, even though I don't really understand when they say creditors. Like I know the shareholders are who's on the memorandum of association, right?
You want to know who the creditors are?
Right, like I still don't understand the concept of the creditors. I know members, they were saying that they're owners, but they don't have shares.
No,
right?
not those. No. Creditors are anybody who the company owes money to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's like I source from Alibaba and I got these like, I don't know what they call it, like consignment or something. And then I pay them once I already make my money. I pay them what is owed at a certain time.
Right.
Okay.
Because the either could be on consignment or you could have it on terms.
Okay. If you don't sell, then you send it back at a certain time frame.
Yeah, or I buy from you a bulk of goods, but I'm paying you over time. Every month I pay you X dollars, or every quarter I pay you, whatever the arrangement is. If you become insolvent, all the people who you have accounts with, all of those become creditors and they have to be paid.
Okay.
So if you, let's say if you got a loan from the bank and
Mhm.
that loan and the security for that loan was a debenture. So the debenture means that all of the goods in your store that you have for sale,
Mhm.
you pledge that as a security to the bank for a loan. If you cannot pay your loan, in banking law, it says that the security crystallizes. So if your loan is due today on the 16th and you have a 5 days grace, on the 21st, whatever your inventory is on that day, it crystallizes, which means that the bank now takes a valuation of how much your inventory is worth on the 21st.
Okay.
And that means that the bank can then take that inventory and sell it to someone else to get its monies.
So that's what they call like ready realizable collateral. Ready
Yes.
realizable collateral. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what about, I saw something too where it had where not numbered shares or something like that.
What do you mean not numbered shares?
Unnumbered shares. I was reading one of the earlier chapters last night. I think it was
Okay.
chapter 1 or something that had unnumbered shares or something in it. Let me see if I can find it.
Chapter 1,
I think that was chapter 2.
2.
Because I know like sometimes when we Google it, it's still a little bit different for us.
Did you highlight it? Which page is that?
I'm looking right now to see if I could find it. I highlight so much things. Everything's done. Well, I could try and find it and then I can just, if I find it
Okay.
before class over.
Okay. All right. That's fine. I'm trying to see. I'm in chapter 2. You say chapter 2, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm looking. I'm looking. You say it says unnumbered
Okay,
shares.
right here, unnumbered shares are permitted. So that's under shared capital on page 26 at the top.
Okay. Oh, I saw the beginning.
Mhm. The last sentence on the first paragraph.
Share capital.
Under shared capital, the last sentence in the middle paragraph.
Oh,
Unnumbered shares are permitted in addition in certain circumstances.
oh, that means it doesn't have a number. There are some certificates like that. I've seen some. There's no certificate number 1, certificate number 2, certificate number 3. It's just a share certificate. So let's just say they incorporate the company capital of 5,000 shares. But you will have in some instances where one share certificate is issued and they just issue one share. And that one share is issued to the only shareholder. So it's unnumbered share. There's no share
Okay.
number 1, share number 2, no.
So it's just one certificate and then the amount would
That's
be
it.
5,000 shares. Okay.
One share. Any more questions? Everybody's so quiet. I don't know what that means when everybody is so quiet.
Thinking. Got a lot to do.
Oh, come on. You all had weeks.
In a short time, it's been a lot.
You
It's
all
a
had
lot.
weeks to get ready.
Weeks and then ballots and work, man. But you gotta do it, so gotta get there.
It ain't that bad. Come on.
I think my only concern is where you're trying to remember like the section this and section that goes along with what your answer is so that you can get more right. Because then I think you look for particular things, even though the answer may be correct, it may be more in layman's term, and you would want more of a company, you to first to use more company term along with where, like, what is the principle behind it, or what is the, where could you find that in law? You know, so I think that would be my major concern.
Okay. Well, we'll see on Saturday when we go through the units. You'll have an idea where you need to focus more, and also have an idea as to what I'll be looking for when you answer the questions.
Okay. I'll see how much of it I can read. Because I was doing one chapter a day until next week. Now I got to do many
That's
chapters.
fine.
And I fall asleep.
Oh. But just make sure that with any particular chapter that you've already covered, one that you think that you probably need to read before Saturday, read that one. Because there may be some of these that you don't really need to focus on at this time. But there may be a particular chapter when you went through it, you were saying, oh, I need to go through that one again.
Okay.
Right, so Ms. Archer, that was my reason for asking if we were able to get the questions before Saturday. But anyways, if we are, I guess you will just let us know and you can email them, please.
What? The questions?
Yeah, for the exam. So we
No,
can really know.
No, this is in-class exam. You can't have the questions before. Only thing I'm going to tell you is the areas for the exam.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
So
but
we
I
can
got to
really
write.
know where to concentrate.
Yeah, I'm going to have to write it first.
Excuse me, Ms. Archer, with regards to the take home, when do we bring that? The day of the exam?
The day of the exam. If you finish it before, you can email it to me.
Okay, all right, cool, thanks.
If you don't want to be burdened with it, you can email it to me.
Okay.
What take home? What are we talking about?
What you mean? Everybody got the first exam question is a take home, and everybody got that how many weeks ago? 3?
Oh, you mean Solomon Principle?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought we already submitted that.
No, we did
The
not.
whole exam can be take home, Ms. Archer.
Oh, well, I sent mine long time, Ms. Archer. So I don't know. Maybe you want to revise mine and then give me back.
There was a new question.
Can someone give a question, please, to take home? Especially until that everyone is on the same.
You mean what we just talked about in class just now, earlier, right?
No.
Jesus, what question this was? Today was. I would like to have that question too, please.
Mr. Archer, do you want me to put it in the chat? The question?
Yeah, you can send it.
Okay, I just put it in the chat.
Excuse me.
Bless you. That's the final exam. One question that I gave you all as a take home. Remember, for homework, you did one part on the Solomon Principle, and then you did another homework question based on piercing the corporate veil.
Right.
And then I do all that. Based on those, you have to put them together, but just answer the question when I send it to you. And then I sent the question.
Oh, I didn't get this.
No?
No, ma'am.
Yep, that's the question. The question you would bring with you to the exam. completed. Because you can't write it in the exam. You don't have any time for that. And that's worth 20 points.
Thanks, Leah.
Any more clarifications?
Not tonight. I'll bring my questions on Saturday.
Okay, all right. So Alicia, you don't have to be on Saturday.
I don't have to be in class.
No.
Oh, because of the questions. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty.
You are excused.
Thank you. So then you'll email me my question
Yes.
at some point. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Who that was? Siobhan was saying something. Siobhan.
I was asking if all the questions could be take-home questions.
Where you just come from? We had a whole half an hour debate on this.
I was stuck
can
in
it be
traffic.
optional? Whoever
I was
wants
stuck in traffic.
Oh, no, it can't be. It can't be optional. The exam the class is designed for the exam to be taken in. Remember now, this is an exam. Once you pass, it goes towards the STEP certification. So if you have a legitimate reason why you can't come in, you need to speak to Ms. Dean. And then she comes back to me. So Siobhan, you need to have a conversation with her and then she'll get back to me.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so let me start to see to wrap my mind as to what I'm putting on this exam.
Hold on, let's break down this question.
Which question is this?
What Leah just put in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
You said you spoke about what this question was supposed to entail.
Yes.
Yeah. I obviously I don't know where what happened, where I was.
Leah.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Can you send her the two homework questions?
Okay, I can look from and I can put them right in the email.
Okay.
I mean, in the chat there. Sorry. That was, remember we did the first question that was on the Solomon principle. And then we did another question that talked about piercing the corporate veil and talking about instances, all of that. This question is a combination of those two.
So all we doing is putting the two together will be already submitted, or this is you're asking for a completely new essay?
A completely new essay. But you will use the information from the two along with whatever else you need to answer it.
Okay.
Ms. Archer, I have a question not related to the material, but since you brought it up about STEP. So once we finish this, trustee, because we are all going to successfully finish this trustee diploma, the second level course, all of us are gonna have our trustee diploma from BIFS. That counts as what? Accreditation, like 30 credits for the prior learning. That's what this counts as?
I don't know the numbers, but I know it counts towards a certain section of the exam at the main of the program at the beginning.
Okay, so that's a part of the student level. Okay.
This covers the STEP foundation. So
Right.
and then
Yeah.
it's 4 parts. It's I think 4 parts to the STEP exam. So with this, you would only have, I think, 3 more to do because BIF's
Okay,
trust,
so that means this would be for the student level, because the 4 levels is student, affiliate, associate, and a full member.
right? So this here would be the STEP foundation.
But that is that in the student level, or that's before the student level?
I think that's the student level.
Oh, okay. Y'all be
Yeah.
on the right track. We on the right track. We getting there.
Mm-hmm. Y'all getting there. Stop being afraid.
We afraid because it matters, Miss Archer.
Yeah, but don't be afraid.
We want to do well, you know.
We could do it. We could do it.
Like
you
we
just
want to see
study.
merit, distinction, and distinctions. We ain't just one pass.
I don't blame you.
Amen to that.
All right. All right. So I'll see you all Saturday at 9:30.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Good night, Miss Archer.
Good
Night.
night.
Good night, everyone.
Night,
Night.
everyone.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night.